Explore the history, relationships, expertise, and data that go into ensuring Stein growers get maximum yield potential. This is the Stein Seedcast. Here's your host, David Thompson.
Hello, and welcome to the Stein Seedcast. I'm David Thompson, National Marketing and Sales Director for Stein Seed Company. We've got another great episode lined up with special guests, expert insights, and discussion on everything you need to know about maximizing yield potential. Today, our special guest is Billi Hunt, Executive Director of America's Cultivation Corridor. Welcome to the show, Billi.
Thanks, David. Glad to be here.
So America's Cultivation Corridor is an organization that is focused on developing and marketing Iowa's agricultural and bioscience economy, connecting innovators and leaders from around the world with opportunities, resources, and talent here in the state of Iowa. Today, Billi will discuss her role with America's Cultivation Corridor, as well as her extensive expertise in regulatory and government affairs. She'll share what she's learned from past experiences and what she thinks farmers should know about the regulatory process, especially as it relates to the seed business. So let's get started. Well, so Billi, to get us started, always like to ask a little bit about your background, where you're from, your background in the industry.
Thanks, David. I grew up in a small farm town named Diagonal in southwest Iowa, a town that lived off the farm economy. I grew up in the 80s, so when the farm crisis hit, it was interesting to see how families adjusted, how families worked harder, how families got engaged. At that point, I was in high school. I decided to go to Iowa State University, got my degree in residential interior design. I still don't know how this farm girl, why she decided that, why she did it. I honestly, as I look back, think maybe I just wanted to make, Iowa beautiful. I don't know, because the farm crisis was an ugly thing, right? It really hit Iowa hard. So I don't know if that's what my 17-year-old self was deciding. Went to Iowa State, got my degree, wanted to move to the big city and moved to Des Moines. Yep. Worked in that field for 3 years and honestly, kind of hated every minute of it.
Oh, no.
And it's kind of one of those things that sometimes you choose your directions and then you figure out what your skills and what you can do, what it is.
Sure.
And so I decided to stay in Des Moines because I love Des Moines, but knew if you stayed in Des Moines, you had two choices, insurance and finance, and that wasn't me, or agriculture. So back in the day, I went to go work for the Des Moines Chamber, now the Greater Des Moines Partnership, as their agricultural coordinator. Oh, cool. I do not know how I convinced the leaders in the industry to pick me for that job, but they did.
You were from a farm.
I was from I could talk to people. I grew up on a farm. I knew what, trade was. I knew what an import-export was, so I could handle that job. And that was really an opportunity when you see that you have skills you may have never known you had. And I got to work with great industry leaders. And at that point, Optimum Quality Grains, which was a joint venture company from DuPont and Pioneer, said, hey, why don't you come work for us? We think you can help elevate our communications and help us with external relations. So I went out there. 18 months later, Pioneer's saying, we need you to come be a lobbyist for us. And I'm like, I dropped political science in college. And they're like, no, we watched you. We think you can do it. And someone told me that being a lobbyist is a lot like being a parent and being a child and understanding family dynamics. When you're a child, you know which parent to go to get what you want. That's the same with lobbying. And I'm like, okay, I think I can do it. And then I spent 20 years there having a fabulous career that this girl who grew up in a town of 250 people, never thought she would have. I got to work on state public policy across the country, got to work on international projects, got to work on federal projects. And, and I'm just an Iowa farm girl. And I look back and I was so blessed to have those opportunities. But one day I woke up and it was time for something new. And 2 weeks later, the Cultivation Corridor calls me, would you ever consider? And then that's my story. So now I'm there. So, I also believe things happen in a timely manner for a reason. And the next opportunity comes when you're ready. And so I've been very blessed.
And it's great when the timing lines up.
It is. And, my husband said, well, we thought you would have been ready 3 years ago. So, it's kind of fun how the family balances that too.
Well, so I want to talk about the Cultivation Corridor because I think that's a really cool project and talk about some of the things you have going on there. But before we do that, when I first met you was during your time as a lobbyist working to represent the interests of agriculture here in the state of Iowa. And I guess one of the things I wanted to do while I had you here was talk a little bit about that life, and you kind of touched on a little bit there. So in that time period there, you were here during a period which was certainly kind of an interesting time in for us in the seed and trait business, right? Kind of oversaw a lot of the realm of many new traits and technologies emerging in the seed business. So I guess I'm curious how, from the first trait introductions to probably toward the tail end of there being new technologies like CRISPR and some of those things, how did you navigate, or what did you take from that time in the work that you did during that time?
When I look at innovations, and I get to deal with that a lot today too, so this will all blend together. New innovations are hard to accept. When you think about it, back in 1926, so almost 100 years ago, when the first hybrid seed came to the marketplace, people looked at it, watched it, kind of like, oh, this is intriguing, but the yields showed the value. And as more innovations came to the food and ag industry, even when you think about innovation, I always think agriculture does it first. If you think about manufacturing lines and mechanization, that happened because of food and agriculture. We did it first. When we think about today's innovations, we're doing it first. We are the ones getting it done. So whether it is seed technologies, digital technologies, even autonomous vehicles, it was agriculture that accomplished that first, and the autonomous tractor and tillage system. And so people sometimes look at us like we're not as innovative as other industries, but we probably just are a little bit more humble. Now, with getting that to the marketplace comes regulatory, comes public policy, and that's where you and I first met, is thinking about how do we help get these novel traits, these exciting things to the marketplace, then we have to not only manage local area, state level, federal, and international public policy arenas and regulations. It takes a lot of work. It's not easy. When you have to type out, and this goes back to my late 90s, early 2000s, Bacillus thuringiensis, there's a reason why they call it BT, right?
Right.
Those scientific terms can be quite complicated to understand.
Sure.
And so then sometimes it creates a lot of skepticism around it. But when you can figure out how to break it down into simple terms and explain what's going on, that is probably the common ground you have to find in public policy and regulatory to drive success. So when you think about all the traits that come out of Stein, I mean, you guys are kind of the godfather of some of that in the industry. You guys went at it first. And you have to partner with others. And that's what I love about my work at the Corridor. We don't do it alone. It's several people working together to get that done. So when we look at some of these new traits, and when I started lobbying, it was the peak of biotech acceptance, GMO acceptance. That is when we were trying to get, Roundup had just been approved. And then other companies started figuring out, okay, they have their own traits coming. Yep. How do we continue to provide that trait, that value, true value to a farmer, and navigate the regulatory systems when, people don't understand what's going on. They don't understand the science behind it. So they create extra hurdles to make sure that it causes no harm. And we know the science. I'm not a scientist. Again, I got my degree in something else. But, when you listen to the scientists that we worked with and we had them go and talk through it, a lot of times it's just having the conversation like we are today that gets it done. But in the industry, when I started, there's probably 20 of us working on it to get it done. So there was a lot of work, a lot of teamwork that needed to happen with it. But then as you look at new innovations and stack traits, that came in next. How do you stack them? Now, CRISPR technology. I got out right as we were starting to lobby for CRISPR. Okay. That changes the game on a global front, depending on which one of the 3 versions of CRISPR you use. That has, honestly, I think, ease some acceptance in Europe. I'm like, now I wish I began lobbying. It'd be a lot easier. But those connections all work together. And then when industry says that they're going to rely on other countries and make sure that there's export approvals so that can get into the grain system and go be used in other countries, that puts a whole nother layer on regulatory.
For sure. And I don't remember the exact numbers, and you may have a better bead on it, but, it was told to me that when original Roundup Ready soybeans were finally approved in, 96, 95, 96, there was just a certain small number of countries,
Yes.
globally that had to have a say in whether that product was available. And then you got on to, in the soybean business, probably, Enlist E3, maybe the last.
Yeah.
And probably certainly double the number
Certainly
of countries
double.
That all now are requiring approval in their country.
And, you look at the European Union, they kind of bring it all under one umbrella.
Right.
But if you have one or two outliers there, so it doesn't look as daunting when you're looking at the regions, but you have to make sure each country within that region is comfortable with it as well.
Sure.
So yeah, there's a reason why the speed of discovery to commercialization is not as fast as any of us would desire. And that's because checking all those boxes along the way and making sure that, from the state of Iowa is accepting of it all the way to countries around the world.
I guess I've heard the saying that at this point the science is easy, the politics it's hard. Would you agree with that?
Well, I would agree with it. And it's, it's kind of like going back to the family situation, right? Sometimes,
Right.
I love my husbands, but some days it's a lot easier than others, right? So if you break that down to countries and you break it down to those relationships along the way, that's where it gets hard. But what I would also say, the success of any new innovation in the US and around the world is based on trust and the relationship. So if you can build that relationship, find trust, that's where we can walk a lot faster than when we don't have that trust and relationship, whether it's a government entity or your neighbor next door.
Do you think that process, and probably for purposes of this, let's just talk about United States, do you think that process of government review and approval was better, worse, or about the same when you left?
Oh, that's a hard question. I mean, I think us as a society in the U.S., things are more strained today than they were 5 years ago, just with people. And so when you look at regulatory systems, have people working in them, I think it does get more difficult. I love seeing that Washington, D.C. is opening up more so you can actually go in and have meetings versus doing it two-dimensional via a Zoom call or a Teams meeting. I think that makes things a lot better because there's some things you just won't say when you're sitting across the table like we are today. You respect people, you have that relationship. So yeah, I would say things are harder. At the same time, I think the speed of innovation and everything they're regulating, there's a lot more coming at them too. So if you go back to the 1990s where there might have been 5 or 6 traits going into the funnel every year, now you have biologics, you have traits, you have all of this coming into the system. And the science grows so much faster than the regulatory scientists can probably be trained. So there is that kind of ebb and flow that you have to balance. I would love to say that every regulator is up to date on science just as much as you'll find a scientist at a research facility in the seed industry. But we know, based on budgeting and things, it's probably harder for them to keep up on everything that's current, especially when there's so much changing in the agricultural space right now with new innovations.
Changes by the hour sometimes.
It does.
So in your experience working with, obviously, here in the state of Iowa, working with the State House, I was curious, how did you work with a body of government, many of whom, even though they live in Iowa, which is certainly a great agricultural state, but many of those don't have experience in agriculture. So how do you bring that to them in a way that they can comprehend and understand what the objective is?
This may be a common thread of what I'm going to be saying. I think it comes down to the relationships. If they don't trust you, they don't listen. And in Iowa, it is very important that you build an independent relationship with each person that's going to be weighing in and voting, with the regulators, with whoever you need to find that success. And more importantly, those have to be true relationships, not transactional items. And those, I think, find success are those that build those long-term relationships. I was fortunate to have a really good mentor when I started lobbying in the state of Iowa. I didn't get to do it first. I had to prove myself in some other states. But when I got, Iowa for the corn industry and soybean industry, it's the state. And so when I finally got the chance to lobby in Iowa, I spent more time talking to those that were not in the majority control and made friends there. And ironically, 3 years later, they were the ones in control.
Ebb and flow again.
You don't just pick and choose. You can't just go to where the decisions are, where the majority's at. You have to make friends across the line. And sometimes I think we forget that in politics, that everyone still has a vote. Everyone still matters. And more importantly, people will stand up for a trade, a tool, something in the ag industry that they believe in, when they've not just heard about it for the last 2 weeks, but something that you've been educating them on for months, in some cases years.
Yeah, that's a great point. So thinking about that, you talked about relationships. I guess I'm curious if what you would advise when it comes to farmers, because obviously farmers have a lot of regulatory and government affairs has a profound impact on what farmers do day in and day out. And I think there are times where they feel like they probably don't have a lot of power in what's happening there. What advice do you have for farmers on how they should or shouldn't engage with that whole process?
Well, I think there's a couple areas that are easy for them to engage. Most farmers belong to associations that support either the products that they're growing or farming as a whole, whether it's, Iowa Farm Bureau, Iowa Corn, Iowa Pork, even the Iowa Farmers Union. There's usually one that you feel like you can align with your values and learn from, or it brings value to your farming operation to engage. They are really good resources for information. I would say also, when you're in the tractors, listen to multiple news sources, multiple podcasts, multiple ways to get your information to make sure your biases are in check. I'm constantly, my husband laughs because he's like, why are you listening to that news station? I'm like, because I got to make sure I keep my biases in check. But then also think about, where are the parts that matter most to you? Is it carbon? Is it conservation? Is it water quality? Is it just, bringing value back to your own operation? Find those areas that are most important and then start watching regulation, public policy that maybe you can visit with your local legislator on. I'm a big believer in showing up to a coffee every session with your local legislators. Okay. They need to know you. And in Iowa, we believe in retail politics. We're kind of lucky here. Other states, though, every senator, representative have town halls to come visit. Go do that. Listen, learn. Hear what your neighbors are saying. Because sometimes the most influential impacts I have had is when I'm talking to my neighbor, someone right next door who may not have the same belief I have or the same understanding. And you can start building community by having conversation.
Sure. And that's a great point, because I think that also, like you said, politically it's an interesting environment these days. And I think sometimes they worry that the loudest voice is the least informed voice. So there's a need for everybody to kind of tell their story so that those legislators know what matters.
Well, I think a lot of times we think we're the only one with that opinion. Yeah. When I believe on most things, there's probably a good 60 to 75% of people who believe the same thing. Unfortunately, on social platforms or on news, we hear the 10% on each side. And I think there's more people that meet in the middle that can drive things. But that's not what is the fun stuff we hear in the media, right?
Right.
They like the things that get us aggravated. And so I think sometimes we forget what we have in common because we're afraid no one thinks like we think.
No, I think that happens a lot. Yeah. Curious about, what effect that some of the new technologies, you mentioned CRISPR earlier, what effect will some of those have, or what types of technology might play a role in helping define the regulatory process, or what will technology do to help the regulatory process?
Well, we kind of talked about it earlier about how just the speed of innovation is slowing regulatory because they have more that they can deal with than what, a government body is set up to regulate. One, I think AI is going to play an important role in this. all those algorithms. I am not a statistician. I am not a math person, but it blows my mind what they can do. And when there's something about math. You either have it right or you have it wrong.
That's true.
There's no
in between with
no
math.
gray material on that, right? No gray. My husband's an economist, so he's kind of the black and white in the family, and I am everything in between. But there's some things that just, it's proven. And so I hope some of those scientific techniques that we're seeing being used all across the industry, even on farms today, there's a lot of AI already on farms today, that we can leverage some of that in the regulatory process too, because not everything has to be recreated and broken down like it was in the 90s when biotech seeds were coming out, right?
Right.
We know what's there. Let's go on the trusted value that's there and hopefully speed up the regulatory process that way. I think also it's important just to tell people as a farmer what innovations you're using. I was talking with my brother-in-law. He has way more cover crops on his farm than I expected.
Mm.
But, that didn't come until, a Christmas conversation. And we were talking about, you mean you're implementing cover crops? He's like, yeah, it's the right thing to do. So again, those conversations help ease the public perception on it, which then allows the regulators to do what they need to do.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point that in agriculture, they tend to be the quiet innovators, right? It's not necessarily crowing about it, but a lot of these great technological advances have a home in agriculture first.
Well, and sometimes it's just the mentality of farmers. My dad used to say, never tell anyone how many pigs you have or how many head of cattle you have or how many acres you have. Because if you have one more than your neighbor, you're the big farmer, right? And so that's kind of just the mindset that has grown up through generations in our industry. So a lot of people don't want to say what innovations they're using until everyone's looking at them like, oh, look at that crop. It's looking really good. Then they want to talk about it.
Then they want to know what's going on.
Everyone wants to know.
Yeah. Well, so let's switch gears here. So 2018, you made a move to America's Cultivation Corridor, and I'm excited to hear about this project. So tell us about the Cultivation Corridor and what it does.
So the Cultivation Corridor is a public-private partnership established in 2014. So in June, we'll be on our 10-year anniversary. Cool. So be watching for our marketing on that. It was started by leaders in the ag industry and community leaders and university leaders saying we need to elevate more what's happening in innovation here. Being from Pioneer, Henry A. Wallace, first hybrid seed, 1926, right? You look at George Washington Carver, Norman Borlaug. Yes, they were fantastic innovators for the food and ag industry. I mean, the Green Revolution started right here, right?
Yeah.
With these scientists. But they're not the only ones innovating. And sometimes it's so easy to get caught up in the industry, just making sure you get your crop planted, making sure your, livestock get fed, that we don't tell the stories of innovation and how innovation happens every day. I mean, Stein, you're a prime example of being innovators before others were there to really provide germplasm traits for the world. But sometimes it's easy to forget that, right? Because that happened so many years ago. And so the idea was to create this organization to showcase innovation in the industry, but also to connect innovations to others and grow the industry by celebrating innovation. So I've gone from defending innovation as a lobbyist to this is really a lot of fun because I just get to tell the stories, connect people, and be a cheerleader for everything that is going on in this industry, which I would say in the last 10 years is innovating 5 times faster than it did in my 20 years in corporate America. Everyone is partnering. Everyone's driving it. They just want to get the solutions there because we have a world to feed. So I get to be a cheerleader now. It's a lot of fun.
So describe for a bit what types of tasks do you undertake in the aspect of promoting agricultural innovation? What are some of the types of activities that are undertaken by your group?
So most importantly, we focus on promotion of the innovation happening right here in America's heartland, Iowa primarily. Yep. But a lot of our investors are global businesses. So, we get to tell global innovation stories too. We are so fortunate to have one of the best land-grant universities, and I would say one of the best top innovation universities in the food and ag industry, right here in Iowa. So, we've been given incredible soils, incredible resources, incredible talent and innovation. And so finding all those and connecting them is pretty exciting. At the same time, we have programs like Cultivo. It's an international program to help scale-ups scale into the US. So we've had 3 cohorts. We'll be starting the 4th one. It'll be wrapping up in May. So we're excited about that. But we search out scale-ups around the world that have unique innovation that the farmers need to see right here. There's a reason why businesses succeed so well in the food and ag industry, stemming right out of here. It's because the farmer's right next door. The customer's right next door. So we have 6 companies currently in our program, everything from ways to increase broadband access on a tractor to opportunities with animal health, plant science, data management. All of them come through this program to learn how to navigate the U.S. system. So we're talking regulatory. So again, this might go back to my regulatory days.
Yeah.
When you look at the U.S. and you want to bring a new product, our system can look pretty daunting from the outside in. But we bring them in here, we break it down locally, and then we help them build it back up, how they access the marketplace. So Myron Stein's been on our program 3 times, and he talks about how Stein as a company leverages licensing and partnerships to have grown their footprint. So as your scale up coming into the U.S., bringing a new innovation, sometimes it might be better to partner with someone. License your technology. It might be good to come in on your own brand. But again, going back to my earlier comments, relationships matter. Trust matters here. So you can't have 15 startups knocking on a farmer's door every day because everyone's going to save you 5, we're going to save you 5 bushels, right?
Right.
Well, how's that all work together? So, that helps by going in with an ag retailer. That helps going in with a co-op, or it helps going in with a salesperson, a seed salesman, a trusted partner saying, hey, this technology we find validity in, we should bring it forward. So we go everything from regulatory, IP protection. Who would have thought I'd be, helping educate on IP? We bring in some good experts for that. But you want to talk about how do you grow a workforce in the U.S. when you're a company not based in the U.S. So we help get them connected, and then we also connect them with key people that can accelerate their growth in the U.S. So it's a fun program. That's something that we're right in the midst of, so that's top of mind. We also do a lot of work on helping tell the story and get innovators involved with workforce. Whether it's a big company or a small company, the key to growth anymore is going to be finding the right workforce.
Sure.
So we have a next gen project that we lead through Iowa State, working with Generations Alpha. It's kind of an interesting term, Generation X and now we're to Alpha. But helping understand what they see in agriculture, what they value in agriculture, what they see are the cool innovations. Working with them, then to also get them connected with our investors. So hopefully we keep the ecosystem employed right here.
Oh, awesome. That's cool. So are there initiatives right now that you're most excited about out of the things that your organization's been working on?
I'm really excited about looking forward in innovations in the robotics area and also in the AI area.
Oh.
I think it's going to really help even on-farm abilities to do more, but all the way to the companies and universities to do more. So I'm having a lot of fun right now watching those types of innovations. Speaking of, you grew up on a farm, I grew up on a farm. Our next gen students last year identified some new innovations, and the one that was the favorite was the robotic rock picker for fields.
Hallelujah.
And if you haven't ever had to go clear rocks out of a field, no one knows how every farm, child hates that job that mom and dad give them to go do. And so that was kind of fun because the rock picker was the one all these young students who had just probably, glad they're no longer on the farm. They're at college right now. They thought that was the best innovations. So, there's just fun things happening to help with the workforce issues that we see all across rural America.
That's a fantastic idea in my boat. So, reflecting on your time so far, what motivates you most in the role that you're doing now for Cultivation Corridor?
Okay, the way you asked that question, I kind of got goosebumps. It is a truly humbling experience to get to work in this industry. I felt that when I was at Pioneer. We get to deal with a lot of leaders of major corporations in this industry. And they all show up, they all reach in, they all want to help. And that's probably the best thing about the food and ag industry. I'm not going to say there's not a couple egos out there, but for the most part, I mean, that's when we first met, right? We're sitting around the table, industry partners, just trying to help each other. And I think there's very few industries where you see everyone lean in to help. And, that makes it kind of fun. You also want to get up and work every day because you don't want to let them down, right? So, but it's truly just fun to watch this next evolution in our industry of technologies. And I think about my father, he would be in awe seeing how the industry changed since he's been gone. He was killed in an accident in the 80s. And you think about looking back to how things have changed, about even how the pickup has changed, our old blue pickup that I hated.
Yeah.
You look at even how the pickup has changed, how the tractors have changed, how seed is delivered, how animals are cared for. The idea that all of that can be done digitally is truly amazing. So if you think about what's happened since the 80s to today, and the speed of innovation is 5 times, 10 times faster, what's going to happen in the next 40 years?
Or even 20.
Or even 20, It might get done in the next 10, right?
Yeah.
So when I look at that, I'm just kind of in awe, and it's an honor to be a part of it.
That's awesome. So if we have listeners who would like to learn more about your organization and the work that they do, is there somewhere they can go to read up and learn more?
Yeah, the best thing to do is put in your search bar on your computer and just type in Cultivation Corridor. You can do it the hard way. It's cultivationcorridor.org, but I don't even type that all the way in. Just search Cultivation Corridor, and you'll see some great examples of innovations happening right here, innovations happening at Iowa State, innovations happening across the world that we're connecting here. It's just a lot of fun.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Billi, glad to have you here. I really appreciate everything you've done for agriculture, and I appreciate the conversation today. It's been really informational to talk about the innovations that are happening in agriculture and the people that are helping to make that happen. So I appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, David, thank you. And thank you to Stein for the opportunity.
That's our time for today. I want to thank our guests and our listeners for joining us on another episode of the Stein Seedcast. And if you have a question for our Stein experts, go ahead and send it to us at asktheseedcast@steinseed.com. That's asktheseedcast@steinseed.com. We'll be back again soon with more expert interviews and insights about all things Stein. And to never miss an episode, subscribe to the Stein Seedcast wherever podcasts are found.
Subscribe to the Stein Seedcast wherever podcasts are found. To learn more about Stein and its elite corn and soybean genetics, visit steinseed.com. Stein has yield.